Kurt Angle had some comments in his podcast this week, The Angle Show, where he was talking about the invasion. We're going to be talking about that pay-per-view for Patreon, Finn, later this week. But here's what Kurt Angle had to say about the WCW invasion of WWF. He said, I think WWE could have went a little further with the invasion. I think if they would have continued on it, it would have made a lot more money because it was very intriguing to the fans. There's no doubt about that. For some reason, they wanted to see WCW versus the WWE, and I'm not surprised. I am surprised that Vince ended it abruptly, that he didn't continue with it. But I know that we have pay-per-views like SummerSlam that is more of its own theme, and it would be a SummerSlam invasion. There's certain things that we don't change, we don't adapt to because we have these prestigious pay-per-views. I don't think Vince wanted to tap into those with the invasion angle. You're never going to see Vince say, fuck, that didn't go off right. He's pretty stubborn and sticks by his guns. When he does something, he follows through with it, he backs it up. Vince has never been it just goes on to Angle sucking up to Vince. But the point of that suck up there was he thinks they could have gone a little bit further. Obviously, do you think that based on all the stuff that they had, because we're now talking about the Invasion pay-per-view this week, should they have continued it past Survivor Series, or was it the right call to just kind of not make it be? Was it the right call to call that quits and then move on and do the Raw and SmackDown brand split instead?
I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, if they were going to continue it, then they would have had to make certain decisions and done certain things several months before Survivor Series when they blew it off in order to preserve it and prolong it. So they kind of put themselves in a position where it was running out of steam because they were losing interest in it. I mean, there was Invasion, pay-per-view obviously did mega business. SummerSlam that year, headlined by Austin Angle, did well. There was still some interesting aspects. Certainly enjoyed the interplay between Austin and Rob Van Dam, who was the guy who probably became the biggest star in the invasion of the invaders. So the things they could have done, they could have brought more talent in from WCW. If you think about it, they started the conversations with Nash, Hall, and Hogan in December of that year. I know they were spotted, I think it was at Titan Tower that year, driving around in a limousine with Triple H, not surprisingly. I think it was late December. Late December, they were all spotted together. So theoretically, they could have kept it going, another 4 weeks and then brought Nash, Hall, and Hogan in to reinforce the alliance ranks. And that way you could have got another 6 months or a year out of it easy. So they could have done that. I mean, I think they should have done that because once they just blew it off at Survivor Series, they had that really hot Raw the next night. I mean, that was one of those huge eventful Raws, almost a little bit like this week's Raw, or post-WrestleMania Raw back in the good old days when WrestleMania took place in front of, sold-out house. So it was a very eventful post-Survivor Series Raw that they presented. That was when Ric Flair came in and he announced that he was 50%
sold his stock to the consortium, or Shane and Stephanie sold their stock.
That's right. So, lots of things happened on that show. And I think, had Hogan, Nash, and Hall been added to the invasion storyline, they could have kept that going. So there was a lot more mileage in it with those three involved. But instead, they were like, we're just sacking it off. We're just binning it off and just concluding it. And if you go back and look, the December pay-per-view with the title unification tournament, Rock,
Vengeance.
Jericho, and Austin Angle, then leading to Austin, Jericho, and Jericho becoming the first champ. It was like really anticlimactic, that pay-per-view. The tournament wasn't really very good. They were repeating things that they'd done years earlier, such as Austin turning babyface the night after Survivor Series, Vince turning heel, Angle turning heel. So there was this reset, but it was going back to things that they'd done many times before, for which there was not much of an appetite anymore because people had already seen them done, many times before and better. So I think, absolutely it should have continued. I think it should have done, because they didn't have anything lined up for December that was going to take its place. And we had Nash, Hall, and Hogan coming in February, wasn't it, prior to the No Way Out pay-per-view. but that was only had a very short shelf life as well. I mean, obviously, Hall self-destructed, and there was all sorts of problems there. And Hogan ended up turning babyface far too quickly. So maybe if you'd added them to the invasion thing, the alliance thing, maybe it wouldn't have worked either. But I think it would have probably worked better had they been involved, because they could have breathed new light into that storyline, and I think kept it going for a lot longer than they did. Obviously, had they done so, there would have been a whole load of problems associated to that, as we saw when they did arrive. Austin was miffed, and there was all sorts of problems triggered by the arrival of those three guys, weren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they had went with if they had kept going and WCW and ECW had eventually become like WCW and the NWO or whatever, and then it had been WWF gets one show and WCW and the NWO get the other show, I think people would have bought into that more than Ric Flair and Vince both are the co-owners and they both own parts of the WWF. So then Raw and SmackDown happens. I just don't think people. It was fun, like the stuff was fun, but I don't think that people bought in that it mattered. And when you look at that Invasion the Raw, the 2 weeks before Invasion Raw, they went into so much, hyperbole to try and sell that show. And if you look at the actual talent available, it didn't deserve to do the numbers of buys that it did. But
No.
but the premise of WCW invading was a moneymaker. So
it's a winner because of the peril, wasn't it? And that was the emphasis on, we are under siege here. We are in danger of being sunk by this enemy. And they communicate that message so brilliantly to the audience, and everyone apart from The Undertaker, of course, who didn't want to sell, but everyone apart from The Undertaker, was on board with it, Undertaker wasn't, but, despite The Undertaker, it was still a success.
Despite him.